Story 1. Failing to teach them that failure is okay and can lead to greater learning. Story 2. I allow my child to fail. My child, 2.5 years old, gets frustrated if he cannot figure something out within 0.08 seconds of trying. At first, I will show him how to do it properly, but after I have done that a couple of times, I stop, so he is forced to sit down and work it out. If I do not do that, he will never learn how to learn. Story 3. Not accommodating their support needs if they are disabled. Failing to arrange diagnostic testing when a condition has been suspected throughout a child's life. If a diagnosis is delayed until adulthood, the child may suffer lasting harm. Emotionally and verbally abusing them. Story 4. My parents always mocked me and called me dramatic whenever I cried. That taught me not to show my feelings or to let anyone know when I was hurt. My mother often went through my room and journals while I was at school and later mocked me about what I had written, which taught me I could not trust anyone with my belongings and made me very secretive and protective of my things. I am nearly 30 and still struggle with these issues today. Story 5. Siding with the bully in the family and urging the victim child to be the one to make peace and behave. Story 6. Parents who coddle their children are responsible for many people lacking basic life skills. Story 7. One thing I have not seen mentioned is when parents share their children's embarrassing moments as dinner party entertainment for relatives. This destroys the children's sense of privacy and often causes them to view their parents negatively if it continues. Story 8. Handing them an iPad instead of letting them find other ways to cure their boredom. Story 9. Protecting their children from the consequences of their own actions. Story 10. Do not let children be bored. Teach them to take care of their teeth. You would be surprised how many problems you can have as an adult if your teeth are in poor condition. Baby teeth are just as important as permanent teeth. Story 11. Forcing children to hug or kiss relatives, family friends, or other adults teaches them that their physical boundaries do not matter and that they do not have autonomy over their bodies. Story 12. Comparing one child to other children is abusive. He is in track and field. Why can't you get into sports? She got an A in science. You couldn't even get a C. Accept each child as they are. Story 13. Not allowing a child to learn in their own way, or failing to discover how they learn and to adapt support to help rather than hinder. Story 14. Parents who threaten violence if someone harms their child may unintentionally discourage disclosure. A child can hear that if they tell, their parent will do something that could lead to arrest or disappearance, so they will not tell. Reframe the message. If anyone ever hurts you, please tell me so we can get help and keep you safe. Keep the promise supportive and focused on getting help rather than on revenge. Story 15. Forcing apologies and telling them to say sorry instead of teaching empathy and letting kids figure out how to be sorry. Story 16. Favoritism between siblings, negative comparisons, and belittling, especially in front of others, caused me to become socially anxious. Story 17. Not giving children chores to do around the house when they are young leads to many young adults who do not know how to cook for themselves, keep their rooms clean, or do their own laundry. Story 18. Take it from someone who hates loud noise. I always hated hearing my parents yelling. Story 19. Constantly tell them how smart they are. Praise them for working hard or being creative. Focus on actions rather than fixed qualities. Story 20. Letting newborns cry it out in their crib as sleep training is not appropriate. Newborns cannot self-soothe. They rely on a caregiver's nervous system. Story 21. Controlling how much they eat destroys their hunger and fullness cues. They then become adults who cannot control their appetite. Story 22. Banning certain things without explaining why, such as drugs, alcohol, and unprotected sex, can be counterproductive. It is important to discuss the dangers and to explain why it is better to avoid these behaviors or, if people choose to engage in them, to do so responsibly. Story 23. Parents should not stay together if they are both miserable. Children are better off with two happy parents living apart than with two miserable parents staying together. Story 24. Swinging toddlers by their arms can easily cause joint dislocation. Story 25. Common mistakes include not letting children feel a full range of emotions. not addressing a parent's own anxiety and stress, overscheduling children, not comforting them when they are scared at night, punishing them too harshly, and not talking with them or collaborating on solutions. Story 26. Many parents do not even realize they do this. They expect their daughters to sacrifice more than their sons. Story 27. Parents often put pressure on their children to make important decisions quickly, especially after high school. Story 28. Teasing them about having crushes when they were younger. Story 29. Being overly strict often causes children to act out once they are old enough, laughing out loud. Story 30. Constantly speaking for their children instead of letting them talk teaches children to stay quiet, even when they have something to say. Story 31. One-time dismissals add up. Sometimes they teach children to stop trying. You are busy, stressed, distracted, angry, not in the mood, or in the middle of something, whatever. When your child shows you a drawing they worked hard on, tells you about an A on a test, or wants to do an activity with you, they want attention. You might snap, say not right now, or I'm busy, or offer a barely attentive that's nice. 1 becomes 2, 3, 4, and those tiny dismissals accumulate. It may be nothing to you, but it is heavier for the child. They do not understand the context. You are their parent and they are reaching out. They are seeking love, encouragement, support, validation, and time with you. And a dismissive response feels like rejection. They are excited and you are not engaging. It matters to them. Sometimes you genuinely cannot respond right away. When that happens, take 2 seconds to respond positively. That drawing is great. Let's hang it on the fridge later. Okay? Or, you got an A, high five. Great job. Let's send a picture to a relative later. If you must delay, give immediate positive reinforcement and plan to address it properly later. It seems small on paper, but death by 1,000 cuts applies. Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin is a song that illustrates this idea. Story 32. Putting themselves down in front of the children. Story 33. Forcing children to become the secondary parent, whether financially or emotionally, causes problems later in life. Children who grow up being told they are so mature for their age often develop a number of issues as adults. I had this conversation with a friend not even an hour ago. Story 34. I fell into the trap of buying them too many toys and little things, giving them something every time we went somewhere, and effectively buying their love. It started when my divorce began 10 years ago, and it took 3 years to break the habit. They are now 12 and 13, so I hope to reverse it by focusing on experiences instead of things. Story 35. Stop going through your children's phones and diaries. I know you want to make sure they're okay, but you're destroying your relationship with them. They will come to resent you. Story 36. There is a joke about parenting. Do what I say, not what I do. Telling children to eat healthy while filling the house with junk food does not work. Telling them to be kind while avoiding a lonely neighbor because she talks too much sends mixed messages. Children watch us constantly. They notice what we do more than what we say, even in small, everyday moments. My husband took the kids into nature, pointed out birds he knew, and photographed ones he did not recognize so he could look them up later. After birthday parties or sleepovers, when there were unopened bags of chips, we took them to the food bank because everyone deserves a treat sometimes. I shopped at the farmer's market, bought fresh fruits and vegetables, and got excited when summer squash, colorful carrots, or beets were in season. What I have seen in the children is a love of nature, hiking, and camping, a generosity toward others, and healthy eating habits. We never lectured about these things. They learned from small actions. One of the most harmful things I did was judge myself and sometimes others. My daughter is hard on herself. She noticed my faults as well as my strengths. The lesson is to watch our actions and ask whether they teach the lessons we want our children to learn. For better or worse, they are watching and learning. Story 37. Dismissing their feelings may seem small to you, but it is big to them. Story 38. Forcing your children into a sport they do not love causes many to burn out early because their parents are trying to live their lives through them. Story 39. Yelling or screaming at your child is toxic. There is a better way to communicate. Do not take your anger out on your child after you have had a bad day. Your child is not a punching bag. If you had a bad day and cannot be around your child without taking your anger out on them, consider seeking therapy or take a walk and calm down before interacting with them. Story 40. Setting a punishment and not following through undermines holding children accountable. Story 41. Not explaining health issues, treatments, procedures, and medical appointments to children can lead to anxiety and even medical trauma-related phobias. When children do not understand what is happening, have no say, and procedures are performed on their bodies, the risk of lasting problems increases. Even for over-the-counter treatments, read and understand the directions and warnings and explain them to your child before administering anything. Story 42. Telling them too much is common. It's so easy to slip into passively telling them about your problems. Story 43. This is not about how hard it is to be human or about perfection being an illusion. I think children need to understand these first and foremost. 1. You will make mistakes. They will vary in size and happen more often than you would like. Own them and try not to repeat them. I will share mistakes I have made to help you avoid some of them, but you will make your own. 2. Food is fuel. Healthy food is the best fuel. Junk food is still fuel but not needed all the time. Variety is important. Learning to make your own food is the best way to understand your tastes, and it is okay if they change over time. 3. Sleep. Sleep is necessary. Rest. It is okay to lie on the couch with empty hands and a quiet mind for a little while. That counts as rest. You will always need sleep. 4. Love. Love yourself honestly first. Then care for a plant, then a pet, then a person. Love requires patience, time, curiosity, and teamwork. Saying no is as loving as saying yes. 5. Death. It happens. It gives room for other things to grow and for life. We will miss those who leave us, and that is okay. It hurts, and that is okay. It is okay to talk about death. Ask me anytime. That is the key. Story 44. Not letting them be bored or fail, or experience consequences that make them sad or angry. At the other extreme, not giving enough support because they are being trained for the real world. Story 45. My parents said they never wanted to be too nosy when it came to our lives. Well-meaning, I suppose, but what this actually meant growing up was that they never checked in on us, never asking how life was going, how we were doing, how we were feeling, or if we were all right. Even after significant events, my parents did not check in on me. They never asked how I was feeling after my dog died or after my grandfather died. I have been dealing with my own emotions since I was a very young child. Story 46. Emotional incest is when parents treat their children like a spouse to fill the emptiness and emotional voids they feel. Story 47. Homeschooling for religious purposes. They do not want their children to be exposed to what they consider woke ideas and isolate them in an environment where the parents control the narrative through their religious ideology. This is a growing trend in evangelical circles, and it is likely to backfire once those children encounter the outside world and different worldviews. Social isolation can leave many of them less socially adept than they would have been if they had attended public school and interacted with peers from diverse backgrounds. This is especially true if they are not receiving an adequate education at home. Some children will accept and remain aligned with the beliefs their parents instilled, but many may turn away from the religion in which they were raised and even cut off contact with their parents after comparing experiences with peers in college or elsewhere. Story 48. Some parents still need to hear this. Corporal punishment, including spanking or hitting of any kind, is unacceptable except when necessary to prevent greater harm. For example, quickly removing a child's hand from something extremely hot to avoid immediate injury is different. Knowingly allowing that to happen is also abuse. Story 49. They do not teach their children that it is okay not to be included in everything. Sometimes you will not be invited to a birthday party, or the children in your class will not play with you. Teach children that rejection is not the end of the world. Story 50. Excessive screen time. Giving children tablets for a car ride or a waiting room is one thing. Letting children use tablets at home all day is another. Story 51. Just be yourself. My child is like a human emulator. She now shares my eating habits and mannerisms, such as how I scratch my nose. My wife claims it's genetics, but my child copies every action I do and watches me intently. She has seen me angry and sometimes acts the same way. I have learned not to say anything when I am angry. Sarcasm can be hurtful. It is something I do not want to pass on. Story 52. Being overly strict made me rebel and act out in college and in my early 20s because I was finally able to experience life. It also made me distant from my family because I could not tell them the truth. I hate having to lie to them so they do not freak out. Story 53. Constantly criticizing them for their mistakes but almost never acknowledging or praising them when they do things right. Story 54. Talking negatively about their own bodies in front of their children. Children internalize that and do not understand the nuances of societal pressures. They hear their parents' insecurities, and children can project those insecurities onto themselves. Story 55. Parents not showing up to their children's events, competitions, or extracurricular activities is devastating. The most painful example is award ceremonies. You do not know how crushing it is for a child to look up, not see their parents, and see everyone else there cheering them on. Story 56. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and was undiagnosed until 30 years old. I would miss assignments because I had them stuffed in my locker. Sometimes they were even completed. My mother would come to school and watch me clean my locker to find the missing assignments. I always felt ashamed. It was one of the factors that made me avoidant. My mother was trying her best, but these experiences left a lasting impact on my life. Story 57. Some parents do not realize that their children will imitate what they see. Parents who throw tantrums at sporting events when their children lose set a terrible example. Story 58. Unschooling. I do not understand how we got to this point of anti-intellectualism, but here we are. Story 59. Applies mostly to teenagers with chronic health issues, but also, to a lesser extent, to everyone. Not involving your children in managing their own medical care, such as scheduling appointments, picking up medications from the pharmacy, and calling to report symptoms, leads to problems. I work in pediatric specialties, and many 18-year-olds are unprepared to manage their own care. Story 60. Excessive screen time is a problem. Children are becoming addicted to screens and have shorter attention spans. Make an effort to interact with your child. Talk to them, read to them, take them places, and do not give them your phone or iPad just to make them behave. Be a parent. Story 61. Not allowing them to manage more daily life tasks on their own prevents learning. If you do not have to do it, you do not learn it. Story 62. Use of phones, tablets, video games, and television before 2 years of age is associated with noticeable differences compared with children who were not exposed to these devices. These differences include altered speech patterns, poor word recognition, reduced comprehension, and impaired social interaction, to name a few. Obviously, not every child is affected, but in my experience, the children I know with these issues were all exposed to phones and tablets held 2 inches from their faces while in strollers. Story 63. Some parents give their children too much space and freedom. I know a few who do no parenting at all because they believe it pressures the child toward a direction they may not want to go, even if the child is an infant or toddler. Story 64. Controlling every aspect of a child's life is harmful. Children need a degree of agency over their own lives. They need guidance from their parents, but many parents dictate every element of their children's lives. Children should have a say in small matters, such as choosing their clothes and selecting extracurricular activities. Otherwise, they will be unprepared when they grow up and must make every decision for themselves. Story 65. Not apologizing when a parent is in the wrong undermines a child's ability to learn accountability. If you want a child to be able to take accountability for their words and deeds, you need to model that for them. Story 66. Solve other people's problems instead of teaching problem-solving skills. Story 67. Do not force them to clean their plate. If they are full, do not make them keep eating or ignore that feeling. If you think they will be hungry later, wrap up their plate and reheat it when that happens. It is annoying, but so are eating disorders. Also, stop promoting the cultural belief that not having seconds or not cleaning your plate means your grandmother will think you do not love her. Story 68. When you panic after your child falls or bumps into something, your reaction often causes the child to start crying. Story 69. Let me do it. They do not give their children enough space to fail, make mistakes, regulate their emotions, and then try again. This trains them to give up early and makes it very hard for them to stay motivated when things do not go their way the first time they try something later in life. Story 70. Overstimulating screen time. Either do not know or do not care. Story 71. Screens are replacing physical play for children. Story 72. Not apologizing and always having to be right erodes trust between a parent and their children. Story 73. Sometimes it seems there are parents who give their children too much sugar and others who are overly strict about their children's diet, with no middle ground. Story 74. Keeping children in a bubble means they will never learn what drugs, sex, guns, or other risks are, and they will not know how to handle simple situations when they become adults. Story 75. Speak condescendingly to them. Make them feel stupid for not knowing what an adult would consider common knowledge. Story 76. Refuse to say no, and do not hold them accountable or allow them to face consequences for their actions. Story 77. Letting children always win at family games such as board games, card games, and video games by adjusting the rules so they have an advantage is fine when they are very young and learning. You can give them help and encouragement and let them win the first round, but they must learn to be good losers and gracious winners. I have a niece who is a poor loser and an over-the-top winner who brags, dances, and points at others. She often says we play this way in the middle of a game if things are not going her way, and then wonders why we do not want to play board games with her. Story 78. Argue with the principle that darling little Johnny would never do that. Spoiler, he did it, and without real consequences he will do it again. Story 79. Telling them to knock it off instead of giving them actual tools for success in the area. Story 80. Giving them everything you did not have may seem instinctive. However, trying to make your child's life easier than yours can create a young adult without motivation. Story 81. Being indoctrinated with religious dogma from a young age was harmful. I did not need to be told at 5 years old that I would burn in hell for eternity in the afterlife. Growing up with Christianity constantly forced on me was damaging. My parents did not realize it. They cared about me and were trying their best. I do not blame them. I blame the church. This can be true of any belief system. Parents should let their children think freely, not force their beliefs and opinions on them. I only experienced Christianity being forced on me, but I am sure it happens with other belief systems as well. Children are separate human beings with free will. No small child should have nightmares because they were told about eternal suffering and the end times at 5 years old. Story 82. If you prevent them from getting into trouble, they will not grow. You do not grow if you do not make mistakes and learn from them. Story 83. Not showing genuine interest in their hobbies. Story 84. I was taught to eat everything on my plate. My parents and grandparents believed in not wasting food, but it gave me an unhealthy relationship with eating. I was often forced to eat more than I wanted and gained a lot of weight. As an adult, it has been a learning curve to push the plate away at restaurants and at other people's houses without finishing every bite. My caregivers did not talk me through emotional outbursts. If I was angry, I was spanked. If I cried, I was spanked, yelled at, and told to stop. I was punished for every infraction, often when I was rightfully upset or didn't know what I had done wrong or how to correct my mistakes. Story 85. Creating them without solid justification. If you cannot properly justify why a life is worth living, you have no right to force it upon another. Story 86. Keeping a joke going when it makes someone uncomfortable is not funny. Your entertainment should not be more important than your kid feeling listened to and advocated for. It might take 20 years, but one day they will explode at you over the stupid things you never let go of or for laughing at them. Story 87. Lying to children about things that do not need to be lied about is a terrible idea. I understand protecting them and telling them what they can handle and what they need to know, but lying destroys trust. I do not trust anything my mother says because her go-to was always to lie. Story 88. Telling them they cannot leave the table until they eat all their food really messed me up. Story 89. Take their emotions seriously, no matter what they are going through. I told my mother earlier this year that I have been more depressed than ever. She was dealing with cancer, stage 3, which was considered easily treatable. Her doctors were not worried, and she still had many days before the surgery that would remove it. Her exact words to me were, "You should not be depressed. I should be. I have cancer." Those words still stick with me, and sometimes I have suicidal thoughts. It hurts not being able to really talk to her after that. Story 90. Another example. Treating a child like your spouse and placing all of your adult stress and problems on their shoulders. Yelling at them when they annoy you until they are sobbing, then giving them the silent treatment for several days. Not cooking meals for them or teaching them how to cook, instead allowing them to snack on whatever junk is in the kitchen that the parent bought, and then constantly bullying them for being fat. Story 91. They keep their iPhones practically glued to their hands. Story 92. Snowplow parenting keeps children dependent, treating them like kids for too long and preventing them from taking on real responsibilities. Story 93. Not giving the kids any downtime to be bored. There are too many activities and too much screen time mixed together, leaving no time for playing and being kids. Story 94. Talking disparagingly about yourself or your body in front of your children. My mother never really spoke poorly about my body, but she was always putting herself down, saying she looked ugly and calling herself fat. It has taken me well into my 30s to realize how much watching someone as beautiful as she was, putting herself down, affected my own body image and self-image. Story 95. We must not let them be bored. This new generation needs constant stimulation. I work in a school, and the children cannot just sit with their heads down. Story 96. Overreacting to every minor incident, as bullying prevents parents from building resilience in their children. Bullying exists, but normal childhood disagreements teach social skills. Story 97. Not letting your children learn to put themselves to sleep by rubbing their backs. Staying with them until they fall asleep, or letting them watch a video in bed does not teach self-soothing. These loving acts can contribute to a new generation of insomnia. Story 98. Not making any effort to understand what their children care about. Story 99. Not apologizing when they mess up. Apologizing sets a good example and teaches them that nobody's perfect. Setting rules with "because I said so" as the only explanation is not helpful. It is okay to explain the logic behind rules, for example. You have chores because everyone who lives here contributes, and chores help teach responsibility. Avoid arbitrary or meaningless rules. Story 100. Never saying no and acting as if they can do no wrong sets them up for failure and serious mental health problems when they enter the real world. Story 101. Bailing children out of situations teaches them to expect rescue. Some parents believe their child will develop mental health problems if they must face natural consequences. For example, suppose Bobby, who is in 3rd grade, repeatedly leaves his backpack at home. Each time a parent brings it to school and says it was their fault for not reminding him, asking teachers not to mark his work missing or late. They worry that if he has to spend time in the principal's office, he will need therapy or resent them. By junior high, staff will not accept the same excuses. Bobby should be responsible for his own belongings. If parents continue to bail him out, he may become more defiant and irresponsible at home and may struggle into adolescence or even adulthood. Story 102. Doing every little thing for them and not teaching them basic life skills. Story 103. Getting upset with them for doing the same thing adults do. Story 104. They do everything for children because they are impatient and do not want to wait, or because they do not realize the children are capable since they never let them try. Learned helplessness is real and it is harming children. Story 105. Calling a child names for mistakes. Pressuring children to do things they do not want to do. Telling a child that when another family member hurts them, it is their fault and that the abuser is just family and they should get over it. Story 106. Parents often do not realize how much time they spend on their phones. Excessive screen time is frequently discussed, usually focusing on children, but it is easy to overlook how glued parents are to their devices, how much children notice, and how much is missed when children play, learn, and create while parents endlessly scroll. Story 107. This is about parents of children with disabilities who overprotect them. I have been physically disabled since birth and I am 40 years old. I feel severely limited in ways that have little to do with my conditions. My mother was my biggest supporter when I was growing up, and my life would have been far more difficult without her. Her support also meant that I did not learn how to solve certain problems on my own. I am learning now, but these are skills I should have learned decades ago. I am also socially limited, both because of her interventions and because of ridicule from peers. People with disabilities may need extra help, but they also need room to grow and learn on their own. Story 108. Telling a younger sibling that they are smarter and perform better at school than their siblings and classmates can create problems. Many bright children burn out, turn to drugs, or become depressed because of high expectations that parents do not even realize they are setting. This creates constant pressure to be better, even for children who seem relaxed. Story 109. Simultaneously telling someone they can do what they want or dream of while preventing them from trying anything new or changing their life because it is too risky produces an anxious adult who constantly feels like a failure because they are too afraid to try anything. Story 110. Talk about them like they're not there. Use them for content and engagement online. Story 111. I let my kids learn how to entertain themselves. As they grew older, I had a policy of radical honesty. If they asked me a difficult question, I'd give them a straightforward answer. It was especially fun having these conversations in the car when they were teenagers and couldn't escape. It was not intentional, but my kids also ended up coming with me to car accidents and fires when news broke and they were with me. My son went with me to a fatal car wreck where a young driver drove drunk into a tree that practically exploded on impact, killing both the driver and the passenger. He watched the driver's classmates erect crosses and listened to them tell stories. When he went back to school and heard others telling stories, he described what he saw firsthand. I really didn't want to show him this. It was a fluke that he was with me when it happened. But he and his friends didn't get into this kind of trouble growing up. Story 112. There are many issues, but the main one is not allowing independence. Your child will never learn or grow unless you trust them when they are away. Story 113. Pacifier use in the first 6 months reduces the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, so I support it. After 6 months, however, discontinue pacifier use. There is a book called Jaws: A Hidden Epidemic that describes the negatives. Extended pacifier use causes poor mouth posture and changes the jaw so nasal breathing becomes harder. Mouth breathing leads to many problems. Quality of sleep decreases, and the brain receives less oxygen, which is associated with mental illness. Changes to the jawline may also reduce facial attractiveness. Studies on twins compared proper and improper mouth posture. The longer you wait to stop using pacifiers, the harder it becomes for both parent and child. Story 114. Unrestricted access to the internet, including YouTube Kids, is detrimental to brain development. Story 115. Talking about adult matters in front of children and not teaching them practical life skills is not harmful per se, but it does them a great disservice. Story 116. They are trying to succeed through their children because they could not. Story 117. I do not know. I do not think all those times my mom screamed at me about how I am nasty and how she was not the maid, after she cleaned my room without permission or warning, despite my having asked her many times not to, were very helpful to my development. Laugh out loud. Actually, a parent on a hair trigger who apologizes afterward, or who hits their child and then hugs them saying, "I did it because I love you," basically sets the child up to enter a toxic or even abusive relationship. I was used to my mom randomly going into a rage, so when my boyfriend did, I was not overly concerned. He always apologizes after screaming at me, so he must love me, right? Story 118. Talking badly about the other parent is acceptable only to an extent. If the parent truly is horrible, I would not blame you for talking about it. But if you simply do not like the other parent, do not speak poorly of them. That will damage a child's emotional well-being, and you could permanently harm what might have been a wonderful relationship between the child and the other parent. Any parent who willingly does this is wrong. Story 119. Not giving them chores, teaching them about money and the family's budget, appreciating their bodies, encouraging regular exercise, and promoting healthy eating. Story 120. Context. My siblings all moved out prior to my teens. Growing up, my mom gossiped a lot about my siblings, her sister, and other relatives whenever one of them frustrated her or did not call. Then she would tell me not to view them negatively. Seriously, she was telling me terrible things they said or did and expected me to just move on. Story 121. Very young children should not be yelled at for any reason. They barely understand reality and should not fear making mistakes. Story 122. Not allowing children to have emotions. Children are human and should be taught how to work with their emotions. Never apologizing when, as a parent, you have made a mistake. Saying no without explaining the reason is unhelpful. Because I said so is not a reason and does not work. Explaining, you cannot do that because this could happen and it is not safe, is a much better answer. Story 123. Hoarding. I read a post on another subreddit about a man who threw his children's belongings away to make room for his own items. He began using the living room where his children used to play for storage. Even in less extreme cases, living in squalor is very stressful. Story 124. Forcing a child to eat all their food, even if they are full, teaches disordered eating habits and can lead to vomiting from overeating. If your child is full and wants to stop, allow them to stop and save the rest as leftovers. It is not difficult. Story 125. Parents are overscheduling and arranging too many activities for their children. First, sports are out of control. 3 days a week for kindergarten soccer? Children need rest and downtime. Second, they need to be bored. They will become creative and explore, read books, and build with Lego bricks. We should let them roam the neighborhood a bit, teach them safety skills, and give them space to be outside. Story 126. My mom told me I would get prettier as I got older. I don't know, it still hurts me to this day. I think my younger self just wanted to be told I was beautiful the way I was. Story 127. Many well-meaning but damaging lessons parents teach their children go unnoticed. Everybody deserves to be loved is a prime example. 2 generations were raised with this mindset, and now many lonely, depressed men are desperate for love and affection they will never receive because they believe that there is someone for everyone. The truth parents do not have the courage to tell their children is that only mom and dad will love them just for existing. Other love must be earned. Romance is a competition. That is just one example. There are a frightening number of pleasant-sounding platitudes with no basis in reality that are taught as facts to impressionable children. Story 128. They think Roblox, TikTok, and YouTube can babysit their children while they do whatever they want all day. Story 129. Telling your children you know them better than they know themselves. Not only is this factually wrong, it creates resentment and self-doubt. Telling your child, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. No matter what the child does, this teaches fear of wrongdoing and is especially egregious when used over minor issues like not doing chores. Calling a child a hypochondriac for having a different pain threshold or being more attuned to bodily changes. It is worse if you refuse to apologize when it turns out the child is not a hypochondriac. Forcing your child to be who you want them to be because of your unresolved issues. This can cause anxiety, identity crises, or make the child stubborn and unyielding. Telling your child they are always wrong and you are always right, especially when you are proven wrong. This often makes them unwilling to accept being wrong later in life. Sorry that this is not just one thing. Story 130. You do not need to give acetaminophen or ibuprofen for a temperature of 99 degrees Fahrenheit or 37.2 degrees Celsius. Low-grade fevers are not dangerous and indicate that the child's immune system is fighting an infection. Antipyretics do not treat the underlying cause of a fever. You can wait until the temperature reaches 101.5 degrees Fahrenheit or 38.5 degrees Celsius. There is no causal relationship between acetaminophen and autism. Story 131. Treating their children as friends rather than providing the parenting they need. Story 132. They use others' fears and insecurities to obtain short-term compliance without considering the long-term harm to the person. Story 133. Social media is restricted to users aged 13 and older for a reason. Personally, I would not let children use it until they are much older because of peer pressure. Story 134. Sheltering and overprotective behavior includes never allowing sleepovers, making children check in every 15 minutes when they are just biking around the neighborhood, and keeping them away from contentious topics instead of helping them confront those topics in a healthy, age-appropriate way. I could go on. Story 135. Criticizing their appearance and wanting to go through phases in which they change it. Story 136. Religious sheltering happens when parents become overly invested in their religion and homeschool their children to shield them from different people, beliefs, and cultures. This can enable the teaching and transmission of hate across generations. Story 137. Every time I see a parent shove a phone into their children's hands, I groan. They also fail to teach that no is a perfectly acceptable answer to questions. Yes, you may have asked if they could play with someone, but it's okay if the answer is no. Children do not have to agree just because you asked. Story 138. I don't know if this is common, but I still struggle with emotional distancing as a form of punishment. Among many other problematic behaviors, my parents never talked through problems with me or tried to help me regulate my emotions. Instead, I was sent to my room, and my mother made it clear that she did not just dislike my behavior but disliked me as a person. As a result, I am now afraid my boyfriend will leave me and hate me simply because he tells me I forgot to do the dishes, and my self-worth is non-existent. Story 139. Excuse them from doing chores and, later, from getting a job. Story 140. A study found that girls first develop negative thoughts about their appearance at age 4 to 5. This is partly due to the media, although children's shows are generally safer. Mostly it is because their parents, whom they admire more than anyone, do not like themselves. If parents do not like themselves, why should the child like herself? Story 141. Being extreme in anything can be harmful. My mom was overly critical and it ruined me. My husband had parents who told him he was perfect, and it ruined him because he cannot see any flaws in himself or in what he does. Story 142. Criticizing them, yelling at them, and not trying to understand them. Story 143. Coddling them and allowing them to roam freely on social media. Story 144. Telling their children they are fine when they are clearly not. Parents mean well. They are trying to comfort and make the pain smaller. But what children actually hear is, "My feelings are wrong. I should not feel this way." And that sticks. They grow up bottling everything because they learned early that hurting quietly is easier than being dismissed loudly. Story 145. Praising someone for innate talent or ability while failing to recognize their hard work. Praising only success while failing to acknowledge when they worked very hard but did not achieve the expected results. A large part of life is realizing that even when you do everything right, things can still go wrong. Hard work is what matters most. Story 146. From my experience, try to be present when they show that you are not welcome. Story 147. Not holding them accountable is not doing them a favor. Story 148. These comments were like my parents' checklist for me growing up. Story 149. Being overly protective and allowing excessive screen time. See the book, The Anxious Generation. Story 150. Telling a child how bad the other parent is. Once my mom moved out, she could not wait to badmouth my dad, saying he only cared about money. The sad part is my 10-year-old brain could not think of a reason not to believe her. My dad, on the other hand, never spoke about my mom unless it was relevant. For example, he would ask if I had told my mom about various things. Can you guess which parent I talked to more? Story 151. I became deeply focused on finances in a negative way. I grew up hearing we did not have money and that we could not afford some necessities. This made me very fearful of spending money. When I was asked what I wanted for my birthday or for Christmas, I would cry, thinking I would make us homeless. Story 152. Not saying no. Children who never hear it grow into awful adults. Story 153. Love is not enough. There is care and maintenance involved in being a parent. Free-range parenting is a terrible idea. Story 154. Manipulative, controlling, vindictive former partners who prevent the children from seeing their fathers. Story 155. People being on their phones is fucking terrifying. At a playground, it's alarming to see adults staring at their phones while pushing their children. It's even worse when an older sibling pretends to look at a phone while pushing a younger sibling and says, "This is how mom does it." Story 156. Telling them you are proud of them, especially when they fail. The planet is full of people who just needed a hug when they came in third at the science fair. Instead, they got yelled at in the car on the way home. Story 157. Countering. Always opposing you and never approving your choices. Their version is the correct one and you are simply wrong all the time, even when you are saying the same thing. This is the kind of situation where you could tell someone the sky is blue and they would still find a way to argue, then repeat the fact as if they were the one who originally said it. Story 158. Two things. 1. Invalidating their feelings. You're fine. Stop crying. You're overreacting. It's not that big of a deal. You can hold them accountable and correct bad behavior while validating how they feel. They should not ignore their feelings, and telling them to get over it does not teach them how to process them. 2. Trying so hard to keep a child from making mistakes, typically by constantly telling them the right way to do something. I learned this watching my son play soccer, and it is painful to hear other parents do it. Kids need to make mistakes. They need to fail. They need to figure out how to do things without constant guidance. Story 159. Telling them something they clearly remember never happened. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.